Our gospel lesson this morning is from the 5th chapter of Matthew. It's the 13th to the 20th verse. We are continuing on in our series on the Beatitudes today. Hear the word of God. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trodden underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. Let your light so shine before people that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Think not that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But he who does them and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. God's blessings be on the reading of his most holy word. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be always in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Well, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. Let your light shine before people that they may see your good works and praise your Father in heaven. So today we deal with salt and light. And I loved the way the children sang that little song, This Little Light of Mine. We all remember that. Aphorisms. Jesus is full of them. He compares the children of God to salt and light. While we, his disciples, we are poor in spirit, we hunger and we thirst for righteousness, we show mercy, we act as peacemakers, and we choose not to retaliate when persecuted. We are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world. We bring light and love and grace to a wanton world having amazing usefulness. Will we do it with our own particular flavor? I'm going to tell you about Clyde. Clyde was an elder in my first congregation in Indiana. Clyde was a gaunt man in his 80s. He drove a huge, big old Cadillac. He smoked stogie cigars. He sat on the session, but he was a really good man. Well, at the first meeting of the session, I remember looking at the books, and after realizing that they were spending twice the money they had coming in, I said to them, "Why did you call me and my family?" And I'll never forget, he rolled that old cigar in his mouth and he said, "We thought we'd make it a crapshoot." Well, then I said, we have to do one of three things. We have to receive double the offerings we are receiving from the existing members, or we have to double the people in the church, or we have to leave. As it turned out, we did all three. But Clyde and Bonnie, who was a phone executive, and I went out 2 nights a week, and we went out what we called soul winning back in those days, calling on every past member and relative of everyone in the church in that small town so we could increase the membership. Well, one Sunday, Clyde looked across the street and he said, "We need to invite that man to come to church on Sunday." So I went over there and I said to him, "Well, I'll come to church." He said, "I'll come to church next Sunday, but you have to beat me in a game of pool in my pool room." Well, I went back across the street and Clyde said, "Well, set it up." So the night came, we gathered, and the man racked up 8 ball, and he said to Clyde, "Take the first shot." Clyde obliged, and after 2.5 hours, the other man never got a single shot in. Not one. 30 games, not a single shot. Well, much chagrined, he put away his pool stick and he said quietly, "Well, I guess I'll see you next Sunday." And on the way out the door, Bonnie burst out laughing and she said, "Where did you learn to shoot pool like that?" Clyde said, "Well, I only owned the pool hall uptown for 35 years. "Well, I've learned it out." And he said, "You never told us that." He said, "You never asked." Salt and light. Can we be salt and light? Can we use our own particular flavor as Christians to make the world a more palatable place and at the same time become a beacon to someone's darkness of hope and love and light? You know, a college professor had a sociology class go into the Baltimore slums, and they got case histories of 200 young boys. The students were to write an evaluation of each boy's future. In every case, the students wrote, "He hasn't got a chance." Well, 25 years later, another sociology professor came across the earlier study. He had his students follow up on the project to see what happened to all those boys in the 25 years. With the exception of 20 boys who had moved away or died, the students learned that 176 of the remaining 180 had achieved extraordinary success. Some were lawyers, some were doctors, and some were businessmen. Well, the professor was astounded, and he decided to pursue the matter further. Fortunately, all the men were in the area, and he was able to ask each one, "How do you account for your success?" In each case, the reply came with feeling. "Well, there was a teacher. That teacher was still alive. So he sought her out and he asked the elderly but still alert woman what magic formula she had used to pull these boys out of the slums into successful achievement." And the teacher's eyes sparkled and her lips broke into a gentle smile. And she said, "It's really very simple," she said. "I loved those boys." No wonder those boys succeeded. Their teacher loved them. She used her own particular flavor of faith, and she used it to influence those boys. And she definitely was a beacon of light in their darkness. What is at the root of our saltiness, of our being a light to others? That's the question for this morning. You know, one of my favorite spiritual guides in this life is Henry Nouwen's Bread for the Journey. It sits on the back of my desk, and every time when I need a little boost, I pull it out and I read something from it. And he writes in there, "To be a witness for God is to be a living sign of God's presence in this world. What we live is more important than what we say, because the right way of living always leads to the right way of speaking. When we forgive others from our hearts will speak forgiveness. When we are grateful, we will speak gratitude. When we are hopeful and joyful, we will speak words of hope and joy." I ask you this morning, do you remember when you may have walked in darkness? It may have been the darkness of ignorance. The Apostle Paul refers to it in Ephesians. They're darkened in their understanding and they're separated from their life of God because of the blindness in their hearts. Or you may have had the darkness of despair. Perhaps there was a time in your life in which you were involved in a relationship after relationship, but no one truly knew who you were. You wanted the spotlight to be on you, what made you happy, what others could do to meet your needs, but you couldn't understand why no one really seemed to care about you. And then someone, perhaps a member of your family or a friend or a member of this church, reached out to you with love and the grace of Christ. There was no judgment, just unconditional acceptance. What a gift. They didn't expect anything in return. They seemed to radiate a light that warmed you and penetrated into your very soul. In this light, you could look at yourself, you could see things more clearly. And in this new relationship, you found yourself hungering and thirsting to possess the same light that they showed to you. You know, right now, at this very moment, there are people who spend every day and every night in the darkness of fear because of a husband or a friend who uses them as a punching bag. It's a horrible, painful darkness. And it can be a verbal punching bag. Perhaps you can shed some light into their darkness. Perhaps you can give them some hope. They need God just as you did, and His light can be reflected by someone like you. Right now, many of you know people who live in the darkness of depression, perhaps from grief or eternal illness or a recent divorce. You have not been called to give answers or solve problems. You have been called to let your light shine into their darkness so that they may see the love of God that shines through you. Paul once said, "For once you were in darkness, but now you are the light in the Lord. Walk as children of light." So salt and light, you know, the light of a candle is a very fragile thing. A single breath can blow it out. A drop of water or two can extinguish it. But as long as it burns, it can guide us through a dark basement when a storm has put out the electricity. A single candle flame can also give off enough warmth inside a stranded car, which I read last week, in the middle of winter, to keep the temperature in the car above freezing, and I never knew that. We are not the source of our light. We are but reflectors of a much greater source. There is one who has touched our lives and has given us the power and the authority to touch others, and that is Jesus Christ. You know, Jesus was a teacher who loved his students. He saw the possibilities in them that no one else ever saw in them. He saw possibilities in them that they do not see in themselves. You are the light of the world, he said. And so they became. And the love they received from him, they passed on to others. And today, there is no place in this world that the light they received from him doesn't shine. Because of fierce persecution, it is sometimes only a faint flicker. And sometimes because of the weakness of his followers, the fire is uncertain and tentative. But that candle, that light still glows. And now it is your possession and it's mine. We are the light of the world. I don't think I'm being overly dramatic when I say there are people in this world who are lost in darkness. They're looking for a light. They're looking for any light to lead them to spiritual, emotional, and mental safety. And so how about your light? Is your light shining this morning? Could they find their way home because of you? You and I are the light of the world, and we show our light with our own saltiness, our own particular flavor. It is what makes us unique as Christians. We have a responsibility for the world. We have what the world truly needs: salt and light. To the glory of God. Amen.